Okay, good day, students. Today we'll be focusing on short communicative message. All right. The focus of today's lesson would be on short communicative message. Now we are moving on to paper 2. All right. We are moving on to paper 2, and this is part 1 of paper 2. All right. Now, again, we are going to base our studies or our discussion on these 3 criteria. Okay, there are types, challenges, and tips. Okay, all right. The type of the question would be of a subjective response. But if you see, although it is a subjective response, it is limited. When I say it is limited, it means you are limited to the requirement of the question and strictly that. Okay. See, this is part 1 of paper 2, yeah, writing paper. Okay. And it yields about 20 marks. And you have got to write in about 80 words. That's the word limit. But must you write within 80 words? That's totally up to you. You can write more than that. Okay. It cannot be lesser than that, because if it is going to be lesser than that, then you wouldn't be able to convey what you want to say in the right way. Okay. Now, mostly emails or short message. This is the type of the question. Challenge. Now, the first challenge and the most important challenge is to understand the requirement or the requirements of the question. There can be one requirement, or there can be more than one requirement. So we will have to understand the requirement of the questions. Secondly, listing out the task requirement. You should be able to list out the task requirements. You see, when you have a task, you need to know what does the task want. Okay, you must be clear. And then you need to list out what are the requirements of the task. And then getting the balance of keeping within the confinement of word limits stipulated. It means you must not be writing within 80 words or in about 80 words. You can exceed 80 words, but always bear in mind that with the time that is given, you need to keep a balance of understanding the requirement of the questions, fulfilling the requirement of the questions, and laying the requirements of the questions in the form of answer within the word limit that you are allowed to. Not exceeding too much, where if you exceed, you would tend to ramble and you would tend to share very matters which are unnecessary, and that's not required. Okay, all right. It is not wrong to write more than 80 words. Remember, it is not wrong to write more than 80 words, but be mindful to abide by the task requirements and time management. These are very important criteria that you need to remember. Now, tips. What must you do? You must first read the task or the question very carefully. Now, this one you've got to be very, very particular. Need to read the task or question very carefully. Students, are you able to listen? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Please turn off your microphones. Thank you very much.
Sir.
Yeah. Okay, so read the task or the question very carefully, and then underline the keywords or the key points. That's the second thing that you've got to do. Underline the keywords or the key points. After that, identify your role. You need to know who you are. Okay, what is your role specification? What are you supposed to say or supposed to speak? And then identify the nature or the role of your recipient, the one who is at the receiving end, the one who has written to you for suggestion or for advice or for anything at all. That person, who the person is, you need to be very sure. And then list down the requirements of the questions or the task. You need to list out what are the requirements of the question. Apakah kehendak soalan? What does the question want? What is required from the question? Okay. List down the requirements of the questions of the task. Be mindful, be careful not to miss any part of the question. So do not miss any part of the question. All right. Now, while writing, when you are writing, you've got to fulfill all the requirements of the task. You need to meet all the requirements of the task. If the question asks you about one thing, you've got to fulfill that. If the question asks you about 4 elements, you've got to answer. Normally, it wouldn't go up to 4, but they can ask you for more than one requirement for the questions, for the task. So you need to remember to address every requirement. Kena memenuhi setiap kehendak soalan. That is the key idea here from this task. Memenuhi kehendak soalan. So keep your language at the right accuracy, precision, and length. So you don't need to write too much. You do not need to elaborate so much. You don't need to ramble. You do not need to repeat ideas in different ways. There is no need for reiterations. But keep your language at the right accuracy, accurate language without rambling, precise, and in the right length. Be mindful just to respond to the task more than adding your own points and ideas. You see, by all means, if your language is lavish, you can throw in your own ideas and points only if they are relevant to the task. But more than that, you need to be mindful to just respond to the task, get to the core of the task, and answer the requirement of the questions. That is more important than merely adding and stating your own points and ideas. Okay? Now, marking requirements. You see, I've split the lesson into 2 days, okay, for short communicative message. Today, we'll be looking into all these details. Tomorrow, we'll be looking into 2 to 3 samples of questions and answers. Okay, so I will have enough time to explain. So I've split the lesson into 2. Today and tomorrow will be this one, and the other 2 days would be a guided essay. Okay, now let's look at marking requirements. This is very important. Your essay will be marked on the basis of these 4 elements: content, communicative achievement, organization, and language. Content, isi; communicative achievement, keberkesanan penyampaian, okay; organization, susunan; language, bahasa. So basically 5 marks for each section, or 5 marks for each criterion. The first one is content. Obviously, whatever that the question requires, it has to be in your answer. If you have it, you get your marks. Okay, so we need to be sure that the content is relevant. Sesuai. It provides full information on the required task. Marks will be penalized for irrelevant sections which are present. Okay, so whatever sections which are not relevant, marks will be minus for that. Okay. Wrong interpretation of the task and misinformation of the target reader will be penalized, which means if the question asks for something, if the question is requiring you to give advice, but instead of giving advice, if you tend to ask for advice, then you have wrongly interpreted the question, or you have wrongly interpreted the task, and you have given a wrong information to the target reader. So you will be penalized. Okay, your essay will be marked down. That is the first part. Second part, or second criterion, communicative achievement. Basically, it means whatever you have in your mind as you write, it has to be able to be conveyed, passed through successfully. It conveys a straightforward and clear response. Ideas are put through in a convincing language presentation. So your language is convincing enough to put the idea across. Okay? Conventions of communicative tasks are used effectively. So whatever conventions there are to communicate effectively, these communicative tasks are used effectively. Okay? These conventions are used effectively. Sorry. Now, moving on to the next part, which is organization, penyusunan. Okay? Usage of sequence connectors and cohesive devices in an appropriate manner. So only in an appropriate manner. You do not simply throw in for the sake of throwing in. Okay, be it cohesive device, be it sequence connector, they are all used when they are absolutely needed, and they are used in an appropriate manner. Just because you have learned a few cohesive devices doesn't mean that you need to apply it in the essay that you write. It does not need to be that way. Okay, all right, so that is for organization. And lastly, language, which is most important. You need to understand, oh, well, I wouldn't say that, it shouldn't be saying that all the four elements or all the four criteria are equally important. But for language, basic vocabulary is enough. Okay, basic vocabulary is used appropriately. No gaudy expressions which are unnecessary. So there is no need for big words to simply be thrown in. They're not necessary. There is a natural flow of fluent language which is present consistently. So from the beginning right up to the end, the language flow is consistent. And there is a natural flow. Okay. Minor errors are tolerated. Okay. Minor errors are tolerated, but meanings should not be hampered or distorted. So the meaning must not be distorted. The meaning must not be hampered. Okay. So these are the marking criteria. Okay. Your essay will be marked based on these four criteria. All right. Now, this is the vocabulary for today. Today, as I told you, will just be the explanation. We will look at the example tomorrow. Okay. Now, there are 5 words. Commute.
Boss, finish very fast.
The first word, commute, which is a complete range or extent. Number 2, garish, which is tastelessly showy, showing off too much. Number 3, full of trivial conversation, useless conversation. Genial, or genial means kind and friendly, and germane means relevant and appropriate. Okay, all right. So that is all for today. As I told you, it will be a explanation only. Tomorrow we'll look into the examples because this is essay. So I want you to understand. So what I would recommend you to do is go after the class, go to the YouTube channel if the lesson is uploaded, okay, and try to go through the criterion.
Okay, sir.